Welcome back to She Talks Money, where we talk about building real wealth so you can create a life you actually want to live. And today's episode is going to challenge the way you think about money in the best way. Because I want you to ask yourself this: are you building a life, or are you just preparing for one someday? So many people are doing everything right financially, saving, investing, contributing to your 401k, but they're also putting off experiences, delaying dreams, and waiting for someday to start living. And what if someday isn't the plan? Today's guest, Lisa Sakai, is here to shift that perspective. Lisa is a financial consultant and co-founder of One Vision Retirement, where she's spent over a decade helping people create clear, actionable plans, not just to retire someday, but to start living the life they want now. She specializes in something called bucket list acceleration, which I love because it's about aligning your money with your life in real time. So today we're talking about how to actually build a plan, why saving alone isn't enough, what financial perfectionism is and how it's holding you back, and how to stop waiting and start living. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer. I'm excited to have our conversation.
Yes, this is going to be great. I'm really excited. So let's just kind of start with your story. I love the concept of the bucket list acceleration. It's like just such a refreshing way to think about money, but tell me what led you to focus on this approach with your clients.
Yeah, I think because my background's a little different. I didn't start in finance. I didn't go to school for finance. I didn't do any of that. I got into finance when I was about 30. And it was funny getting into it as an outsider. I started to see some wrinkles that were happening, and we would
Mm-hmm.
be doing plans. I started on the insurance side, so we would do plans kind of for free to, get some insurance sales from it kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing. It's a big it's a big thing that people do in the insurance side. And I really enjoyed the planning part, and I would uncover issues that would happen, things like that. And then people would just disappear. And it wasn't because I'd proposed any life insurance at that point. They would just disappear. And I thought, you know, there was no, they had been putting it off so long. And half the time they would disappear before I even presented a plan. It would be like just from
Mm-hmm.
having a discussion. And I realized that this was something that people just really didn't want to discuss. They didn't want to talk about. And how could I make it more fun for people
Mm-hmm.
because to me, and you might have a different opinion, but to me, planning is about taking control of your life and getting to do what you want to do. That's what I think of as financial planning, not some drudgery that you got to, look at do your bookkeeping and stuff like that. That's not what I'm
Yeah.
telling people they have
Mm-hmm.
to do. And so I kept trying to find some way to make it more fun, more unique, something of that nature. And I was listening to a podcast, and I listened to a gentleman who's also a financial advisor. I have no idea what his name is or where he's from. It just random podcast. And he was talking about how he had been having success bringing his clients with him to do his bucket list items. So if it was like a
Oh,
bourbon
fun.
tasting or something like that, nothing,
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't taking them to Paris, but things like that, just little thing,
Sure.
cooking class, whatever, because it was stuff he wanted to do. And he found out that people had certain things they wanted to do. And so he started incorporating that into his client experiences and stuff. And I thought that's a really good idea, bucket list. And I just took it in a different direction, which was using it to help people motivate themselves to live now, to
Mm-hmm.
enjoy life now, because it always seems to be the two extremes. People who feel like they can't do anything, right? They can only save for retirement and their future, and they can't do anything now, or the YOLO, you only live
Yeah.
once. I'm never going to plan. That's just not my nature, that kind of thing. And there is
Mm-hmm.
a very happy medium, which is you enjoy your life and you use that ability to save for the things that you want now to also save for the future. And there is a happy medium for that. So that's really
Mm-hmm.
where that came from, is finding that happy medium for people. Because I don't think either extreme is healthy.
Yeah, so I come from a finance background as well, but the mortgage side of things with real estate, and I love when I get people's bank statements that are labeled like they have 10 accounts, right? And they're labeled like so and so's car and this trip, and like there's short-term things and long-term things, and we have discussions like this
Mhm.
your point, like the bucket list. What are all these accounts and what's going on? So I love that people
I love
think
that.
about
That's
that.
perfect. I think that's
Yeah,
great that they think that.
exactly. So, what exactly is bucket list planning and how is it different from traditional financial planning?
Right. So basically, what we do is we through my process of starting planning for people is a little different. We go through money memories. We go through,
Hmm.
you can call it woo woo, you can call it whatever. I believe money is extremely emotional, more emotional than
Hmm.
anybody tells you. And
Hmm.
so I really want to tap into that emotion because it gives me a better insight of how people might react to a bad market or to, a
Yeah.
setback, something like that. That will happen eventually at some point,
Hmm.
right? So I do dig into that. And part of that is discussing what do we really want to do. And part of this discovery journey of building this out was I realized that people didn't have very detailed plans. They'd say,
Hmm.
I want to retire and I want to travel. Okay, great. When are we retiring? I don't know.
Hmm.
Where are we going first on our first trip when we're retired and traveling? No idea. Like they
Hmm.
hadn't really thought about it. They just kind of regurgitated what everybody else had said. So we
Yeah.
really dig into what do you truly want? If you could lift the veil and nothing was off limits, even if it's walking on the moon. I don't know if I can make that happen for you, but we can certainly save for that. And
Yeah.
that you have
Yeah.
the money to do it if it comes up. So,
Yeah.
so we just build in, some top things and we take one by one and we build it into the plan. So it's part of your saving strategy. So let's say a quarter, it just depends on the situation, but let's say a quarter of your savings goes to this bucket list thing.
Hmm.
And then the rest goes to long-term retirement, long-term cash reserves, whatever, buying house, real estate, whatever it is.
Sure.
So that's what we do is we build that in because basically it motivates people because they're not contributing to their fun thing if they don't contribute
Hmm.
to the rest of it. So
Yeah.
it just gets people a little bit more in line with investing and putting money away because I really do think saving is the key to everything. It's boring, it's old school, nobody thinks that's it, but there's not some magical vehicle
Right.
or pill or anything that we haven't told you about. It really is just saving and putting it
Yeah.
into the right buckets for you.
Yeah. And I love that you bring up money stories and like what we carry, with us from when we were younger and what we were told. And I think a lot of people don't realize how much that resonates and shows itself in our real life. And do you find that a lot of people wait too long to do like the reverse engineering math? Like, right? Like, okay, I have X number of years until I retire. This is the lifestyle. My husband and I just had this conversation because
Yeah.
my idea of retirement apparently is quite more bougie than his is. So I'm like, wait a minute. I want to do this, and this is how much these things cost. And in order to
Hmm.
have that, like, we have to have X amount of money put away. You know what I mean? So do you think
Yeah.
people wait just too long to figure that out? And then by the time
Yeah.
they do, they're like, oh, shoot, I thought I could retire in a few years. It looks like I'm working a lot longer.
Yeah. I mean, I think people change too. I think as they get older, they either have developed this lifestyle that they want to augment,
Mm.
which might be the more bougie stuff that you're talking about. Or, they just like I have another lady who I did a podcast with, and she said because she travels so much and does all this stuff,
Hmm.
her perfect retirement is every night being able to sit, on her porch and have a beer and grill
Hmm.
some steaks. Like that's what she
Love
doesn't
it.
want to do a bunch of traveling, a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
So, it just depends, I think, but I think it's hard what I think is hard is, at 20 years old, and this is why people don't start early saving, which is a problem. I
Hmm.
think the earlier you start, the better. But this is
Hmm.
why a 25-year-old is not inclined to start saving for retirement, quote unquote,
Hmm.
I call it financial freedom, by the way. I know our company
Yeah.
says retirement, but it's because I do personal planning and my business partner does business planning, which is
Okay.
retirement plans, right?
Yeah.
But I call it financial freedom because that can happen earlier or later. It's really
Yeah.
what everybody's trying to figure out. You don't have to ever retire if you don't want to.
Hmm.
But I would say that, 25-year-old doesn't really know what they want, who they're going to
Yeah.
be at 65 or 70 whenever they decide they want to hang it up. And I
Yeah.
just think that I think you have to reverse engineer it at a certain point, but I
Hmm.
think that's kind of part of that perfectionism that I
Oh,
noticed
sure.
that we're going to talk about.
Hmm.
That's the thing is people are waiting to get this definite idea of what
Hmm.
that's going to look like before they start saving for it. And I think that's the wrong thing. You start saving for the what
Hmm.
could be's versus
Sure.
that's why I said you want to walk on the moon. I can't make that happen for you, but we can save for that.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
that's the thing is that, what could be's
Hmm.
is what you save for, not a definite plan. Because I will be honest, Jennifer, not one person has retired and done exactly what they said they were going to do. Not
Right.
one that I've
Right.
worked with. It's
Hmm.
just totally different. They just have
Yeah.
totally different lives once they retire. They discover who they are if they don't know. And I also say the bucket list planning is part of discovering who you are
Oh,
as a
for
person
sure.
outside of work, and that's the
Yeah.
problem is a lot of people don't do that. And so they're like, I like knitting. I had no idea, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So
So why do you think so many people default to the like save now? Like we're encouraging saving, right? But not to a point where you're not living either. So why do you think so many people default to save now, live later?
because we live in extremes. I mean, I think we can see that with everything that goes on in the
Yeah.
world, right? We live in very extremes. So people think that they have to be uber disciplined. And so that's not me. So I'm just not going to do it.
Hmm.
Or, you've got to be uber disciplined. So I have to do it this way. Or if
Hmm.
I let myself enjoy anything, I'm going to completely fall off track. And I
Yeah.
think part of that is, I would say the discipline side of it is typically because they don't, that's exactly what you'd said, should they reverse engineer it? They haven't done any of that. They just kind of
Sure.
I've noticed that people who put money away are just that's what they do. Like my husband's one
Yeah.
of those people. Like he just
Hmm.
that's what he does is he focuses on saving money, saving money, saving money.
Hmm.
That's just and that's his thing, which then they end up with maybe way more money than they need to
Yeah. Yeah.
I've had people who come to me with a certain amount of money. They say there's no way I can retire with this. And we go through their lifestyle, we go through what they truly want, and they can retire tomorrow if they want
Yeah.
to, because they don't need to save $5 million or whatever.
Right.
Somebody who wants to, travel the world is going to have to save for that. I'm not saying you have to save $5 million,
Yeah.
people. I'm just saying that, it just depends on what you want. And so I think the action of saving is really important, but I think not having an idea of what you're saving towards or consistently
Hmm.
thinking about, I guess it's always going to be evolving, like I said, but you have to have in the back of your mind, like, what are we saving for? And I think we
Yeah.
get taught when we're young to save, put 10% away, put 10% away,
Hmm.
whatever that number is that mom and dad told you to do. And we don't have an idea of
Yeah.
what it could be.
Yeah. I think that short-term goal, like what are we saving for short-term, like
Mhm.
vacations, for example. I love that, we get to take our kids on a couple vacations every year and they've seen the world and you know what I mean, which is a
Mhm.
great experience.
Yeah.
And then long-term, more long-term vacations for just mom and dad when the care maybe grandkids at that point way down the line. But
Yeah, my
so for
parents did that too. They
yeah,
took me to see everything. And by the time they retired, they really didn't feel like there was any place else they wanted to go. So they
yeah,
haven't traveled in retirement. So they kind of
sure.
did this planning without even knowing it.
And someone at my age, where my dad is at that age now, he's retired. I think as much as I say to my husband, we are not going to be like this, you kind of get your comfort circle, I think, when people are older. You
Oh,
know what I mean? Like, I think my dad thought he would travel a lot more, but now they're just, they're comfortable in their little bubble and they don't
mhm.
really want to take those trips and go on planes and do those things. You know what I mean? So the what ifs,
Yeah.
to your point, like down the line, it's not happening. So I wish he would have done more when he was younger because I think we think we're
Mhm.
going to, and then we get to a certain age where we slow down, we age, go figure, and we just don't want to
Well,
do those things as
travel's
much,
such
right?
a pain, so I don't
It
blame them at
is.
all. I mean, you kind of just have to suck it up. But,
Yeah.
I'm sure by the time you hit a certain age, you're like, I'm done sucking it up. I don't want to
Yeah,
do it anymore.
exactly.
So
Home
maybe
feels a
that's,
lot more comfortable.
yeah, I mean, my parents are the same way. They hardly leave the house half the
Yeah. Yeah. So for someone listening who feels like they don't even know where to start, how does someone actually begin putting together a
time.
plan?
So I think the biggest thing is I always say start with basics. So, before we get into like what do we want and how do we do that, do we have an emergency fund? Let's
Yeah.
assess some debt, that kind of stuff. Um Assessing debt versus, certain types of debt. Obviously, a
Hmm.
mortgage debt is much different than having a ton of credit card debt, hence why
Yes.
you can't buy a house if you
Yeah.
have tons of credit card debt. You know, and really taking a look at, that kind of debt to income ratio that you have, that you
Hmm.
guys use and maybe even make it a little harder on yourself. And, that emergency fund I think is really key. I think people kind of forget about it. And they go, oh,
Hmm.
I have 5 grand, I'm good. How much does that cover? Are we sure? It's just a different time that I think people need to have the boring money. And people don't
Yeah.
want to have the boring money. They want all their money to be
Hmm.
making tons of rate of return and tons of this. And so everything's at risk. And I think that kind of started when interest rates were so low, and
Hmm.
after 2008, 2009, everything was so low for so long that people were
Hmm.
just pushing money into different places that they probably shouldn't have with different
Yes.
risk.
Yes.
And so having boring money
Hmm.
in good times of interest rates and bads are still you still need to have it. So I think
Yeah.
that is the biggest thing is really what does your expense ratio look or not expense ratio, I'm
Mm.
sorry, your emergency fund look like? And also what do your expenses look like? I think the
Sure.
biggest thing people can tackle is not beating themselves up on what they spend, but understanding what they spend money on.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing.
Too
And
many
how
people
many
don't even
people
pay attention to it.
Oh yeah, they don't
You
look at
know?
their credit card statements. I mean, how many
Mm-mm.
people do you have you ask for certain, statements or
Hmm.
things like that for credit cards and different, and they can't even get into their portal because they have no idea how
Yeah.
to, nobody's sending credit card statements to homes anymore, so I don't know how they look at anything. They
Yeah.
can't get into
Yes.
their bank portal. So, that kind of stuff happens a lot. So I think those little basics, like knowing how much, you're spending and your spending habits, just
Hmm.
looking every once in a while, I'd say once a month, look at your credit card and just see what you're spending your money on, check for fraud, all that stuff in the
Yeah.
emergency fund. That's what I would start with. And then once you have those solid and you feel comfortable with basic, I mean, you're basically looking at cash flow think of
Hmm.
yourself as like a small business. It's cash flow. And that's
Yeah.
all I'm telling people to do, right? And so once you understand your cash flow, then you can move into, okay, do I put it here? Do I put it there? And start developing a plan from there. And there's tons of tools online people could utilize. Obviously, a financial advisor you can work with. And just
Mhm.
to dispel a myth that people have, you don't have to have a bunch of money to invest with a financial advisor anymore to work
Right.
with them. There's plenty of people out there that do both. I do investing and I do financial planning
Okay.
as a project essentially.
Hmm.
I work with people who just want to plan put together and don't want to do investing or don't have the money to
Hmm.
invest or just starting. I've worked with 25-year-olds just kind of
Oh, I
starting to
love
build
that.
build stuff together. And
Yeah.
obviously they don't have $1 million to invest,
Hmm.
they're just getting going. And I think
Yeah.
that's and you've got people who are, just do the planning part and don't do investing, and you've got people who just do investing. So there's
Okay.
lots of different levels. So I think you just need to find, if you do want professional help, you just have to find the advisor that works for you and that can help with that kind of stuff.
Okay. Okay. So let's talk about goals for a second. Everyone sets them, but not everyone follows through. So what's the difference, do you think, between setting goals and actually accomplishing them with regard to your money?
Right. So I think one, it has to be realistic to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest thing that people have to have to do is actually personalize their goals.
Mm.
That's my big thing that I think people don't do. And like I said, it's just generic travel more,
Yeah.
there's just no, save more. That's a goal that I've
Mm-hmm.
heard before. I'm like, save what more? Save how much
Yeah.
more, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's start. So I think, let's say your goal is to save $1,000 a month. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you don't save anything now. Don't try to start at $1,000 a month. Start at $100 a month. Start
Yeah.
at $50 a month. Start at whatever you can do and
Mm-hmm.
play a game with yourself and start upping it up. Once you get to
Mm-hmm.
$50 a month pretty comfortably for 3 months, now we push to $100 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got to be that mindset of paying yourself first and paying
Yeah.
everybody else afterwards. It's that old
Mm-hmm.
theory that our great grandparents really would do. That's kind
Yeah.
of what we should be doing more. But it's always like, put ourselves last. And, as women, we do this all the time with family and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Put ourselves last, put everybody else first. And
Yeah.
that's not the way to do it. You really do need to prioritize yourself. Um,
Yeah.
and so that's how I would deal with it is make sure that I always say don't have more than three goals at a time that
Okay.
you're working on. Really, two or one is better if you're
Okay.
just kind of getting started. But if you've been doing it for a while, I would say three is kind of the most I would do.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them can be a bucket list thing. Typically, it is if you're going to have
Sure.
three. But I would say, if you're just doing a strict financial goal, just make sure it's detailed and outline where you're going to start and those little steps you're going to take to push forward. And I would review, and I got this from which book is that? One of the books that I was reading. I think it was Brian Tracy's book on goal
Oh, sure.
setting. But I think he says to review your goals like every single day, and I totally
Oh,
agree with him on that. I think you
yeah.
have to write them out with a piece of paper and a pen every
Mm-hmm.
single day. Because if you're not consciously aware of it,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to do it. And the same thing with the atomic habits.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about that too. If you want to do yoga, just the first couple days, just put the mat out.
Yes.
If you want to go to the
Yeah.
gym, just drive to the gym, or
Yes.
whatever it is. Like he talks about these little things that are really important to get the basis going. To have some little wins. And I think that same goes for finance. We always think, again, it's all or nothing. If I
Yes.
don't save $1,000 a month for the first 2 months, then I've lost it and I shouldn't do it at
Yes.
all. No, that's
Yeah.
the way it works.
Yes. It's funny how our minds work like that. I was just talking to my mother-in-law last night, and I'm like, I hate taking pills. Like, I'm just not, and I have all these vitamins. I've done all the blood work. Like, I know what I'm deficient in and I should be taking. It's
Hmm.
even on my calendar, and I see
Yeah.
it, and I'm like, ugh, I don't want to do that. So then I was not sleeping well. So I said, you know what? I'm at least going to take my magnesium. And so I have been on a very solid run of taking my magnesium every night before I go to bed. And lo and behold, I am sleeping so much better. So I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
it turns out these vitamins work. So now, but now, it was the little thing. I think I needed just one little thing, and now I'm motivated to take the rest of them every
Oh
day.
no,
But
totally. It does take that little thing. And you kind of pointed out the bucket list thing too, right?
yeah,
You weren't feeling the effects pretty quickly. You'd be like, this
right.
isn't working, forget it,
Mm-hmm.
And we all do
Mm-hmm.
that. And the fact that it's working so quickly for you has now
Yeah.
motivated you to continue to do that. I do that same thing with gut health stuff, like probiotics
Yeah.
and stuff. I was
Yeah.
feeling really, I'm at that age where I'm
Yeah.
going perimenopause and all that fun stuff.
Me too.
And I just felt icky every day. Like I just
Mm-hmm.
felt ugh. And I started taking this and immediately I felt better. There is
Mm-hmm.
not a day that I am skipping that because I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
feel the other way. I want to feel healthy and
Yes.
happy, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So if you feel the immediate effects of something, it's the bucket list. It's exactly
Yeah.
what I'm trying to do with the bucket list.
And I
So
think
that,
that's your point of starting
yeah.
small, right? If you do
Mhm.
$100 a month, all of a sudden you start to see that grow pretty quickly, and then it
Mhm.
gets addicting in your life. And then it's a challenge, like
Yeah,
it's not a game, like how much more could I do? How, you know what I mean? And that it's just builds
exactly.
and then it becomes really fun. So you talk a lot about knowing your why. Why is
Mhm.
that so important when it comes to money and life planning?
So the why is really important because that is when you know if you're just doing what society has told you to do
Mm,
or have the goal because society told you to have it or you actually want it.
sure.
So there's a debate that kind of goes on, should people, and this is probably personal for you, should people own a home or should they not?
Hmm.
A lot of the so-called financial gurus are saying home ownership is expensive and you should do
Hmm.
other stuff. And I totally disagree with them. But you know, do you really want to own a home or is that
Yeah.
what you were told? And
Yes.
you kind of look at people who, won't save for a down payment, won't
Hmm.
get the paperwork to you that you need to have
Yeah.
to pre-approve them for a loan, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And usually that's because they don't really want to own a home. They're
Yeah.
kind of okay. And should everybody own a home? Of course not. Like it
Right.
just depends on the person and their stage of life and all that stuff.
Hmm.
And that's the thing is that a lot of people have these goals because that's what we're supposed to do, right? We're
Yeah.
supposed to
Yeah.
get married, have the home, have the 2.5 kids with the dog, and like that's what we're
Yes.
supposed to do.
Yes.
And so the why is really important because you say, okay, why do you want to own a home? Because I want security. I want to be able to cook in my own kitchen. I want it. That person's definitely
Hmm.
motivated. If somebody says, I don't know, or because we're supposed to, or something like that,
Hmm.
there's no motivation there to do
Yeah.
it. So the why is really important because it actually proves to you that you actually want it and it gets you more excited about
Yeah.
that goal.
Yeah. Love that. So I'd love to talk about something you mentioned, financial perfectionism. What is
Mhm.
that and how does it show up for people?
It's a lot of us women do this because we do it
Mhm.
for everything, right? We have to have things perfect before, we have to know if we're going to try to lose weight, we always have to have the perfect like diet. We're
Yeah.
going to know exactly what we're going to do and we're exactly how we're going to do it and this is what I'm going to
Yeah.
eat. I'm going to do my intermittent fasting these times. If it gets screwed
Hmm.
up within the first week, we're like, well, that's it. It's just done. This is not the right thing for me, right?
Yeah.
And we do, and it's just how we are. We want things to be perfect. I think that's a wonderful thing about women, but it also can hurt us when it
Yes.
comes to actually making some progress on some stuff.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times what I notice, especially when I work with women, individually, whether they're,
Hmm.
just doing their planning on their own and their spouse isn't interested or they're single,
Hmm.
is that there's a lot of beating themselves up about things they didn't do in the past.
Yeah.
I Most of my conversations about 2008, 2009, with the housing crisis and with the
Yes.
market dropping and all that stuff is with women because they are still
Okay.
thinking about the mistakes that they made back then, which I think
Yeah.
is fine. You need to learn from it, but
Yes.
we also can't let that hold us back. And so I think we think that until I have the account open, until I
Mhm.
know for sure I should be putting it into a Roth IRA instead of a traditional IRA or the traditional
Yes.
401k versus a Roth, I'm just not going to contribute because I don't
Hmm.
want to make a mistake. That's wrong. I'd
Yes.
much rather you put it into one or the other. You're still going to be better off in the long
Right.
run for
Yes.
that. Yeah. And so that's the that we think, and the thing that I hear the most is, well, I don't know anything about this. Like I'm not good with
Hmm.
money. I don't like finance. I don't know anything about it. So
Hmm.
people just don't do anything.
Hmm.
Or they kind of absentmindedly put into their 401k, which is okay, obviously, but they haven't
Yeah.
really thought through anything. They just,
Hmm.
because it makes them uncomfortable. I was that person, before this, I was a school teacher. I didn't understand anything about finance. We didn't get taught anything about finance in
Yeah.
school. And so my husband made a a comment about should we put some of our extra cash in something with a higher interest rate. I thought he was talking about a loan because interest rates are on loans, right? I mean, it didn't make
Yeah.
any sense to me. And I just said, no, just leave it. Just leave it. That's a mistake because I
Hmm.
was unwilling to be a little vulnerable and say, I'm not perfect. I don't know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. Could you explain that to me? I just
Hmm.
made a rash decision out of fear more than
Yeah.
anything. And I do think that we all think we are, and I did at least. I felt like I was the only one that didn't understand any of it.
Yeah.
I didn't understand what a stock was versus a bond. Like I didn't understand
Hmm.
any of that stuff. I thought this is where I'm dumb. And a
Hmm.
lot of women feel that way. You are not alone. I would say
Hmm.
95% of women don't understand a lot about finance because we're not taught anything about
Yeah.
finance. We're just not. And the guys tend to, my husband's funny, like he knew about some stuff, but like the amount of times he said, and this co said, you're not contributing to your 401k or you're not trying to buy a house. Like these are the guys talking to each other. We
Hmm.
don't talk about that stuff. And that's not bad. It's just not, when's the last
Yeah.
time your girlfriend said, how's your 401k doing? Like, nobody,
Right.
we just don't
Right.
talk about that. So we don't get that like community knowledge either.
Yeah.
And so I think you just have to decide you're going to start and do something. Maybe it's reading an article on Yahoo Finance or, Google or something
Sure.
once a week on something that you completely don't understand so that you can
Hmm.
start making some steps forward, whatever that is. You just have to start doing it
Yeah.
versus having a full-fledged plan in place before you're going to start something. That's really what perfectionism and why that's hurting us so much.
Yeah. I love and I mean I see that every day with people and buying houses. And to your point, not everybody should, but the people that aren't out of the sheer fear or unknown of like I don't know what it would
Mhm.
take, I don't know if I would qualify, I don't know how much money I would need. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I can't tell
Mhm.
you how many people I talk to, I finally talk to them, they realize how easy of a process as it is, and they say every time, I wish I would have called you 3 years ago. Like I wish we would have had this conversation 3 years ago when I,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I've just been
Absolutely.
throwing a rent away. So again, today is better than tomorrow, but still, sometimes we have to let go of that fear and
Yeah.
sometimes just educating yourself. Like I said, picking up a
Mhm.
book and reading and feeling just a little bit more knowledgeable about something
Exactly.
makes it easier to ask some questions of
Yeah.
people like yourself who are, professionals at it.
Well, and even just
Um,
talk to your girlfriend. I mean, maybe if you're going to go out for drinks with a girlfriend this week or something, just
mhm,
like ask them about something
yeah.
that maybe it's estate planning. Maybe you don't know if you should have a
Hmm.
will or trust and what have they done? Like actually introduce it because it's amazing how many other women are like, oh my gosh, let's talk about that because I don't know anything
Yes.
about that. Where do we go
Yes.
find that? And maybe one
Yes.
person has done it so that they can explain it to the other ones. It's just introduce the topic that you're got
Hmm.
questions. Friends, a lot of them have advice or resources or something, but we just don't do that because we're always afraid that that's not couth to talk about money.
Yes.
And we just don't, we like talking about very personal things. How are the kids? How is
Yeah.
the husband? How's that kind of stuff. But we
Yeah.
don't, that seems almost too personal in some respect.
Money and hormones, I'm telling you, we don't.
Yeah.
You
I
bring
mean,
up hormones at this age with other women, like they don't want to
oh,
bring it up, but the minute you bring it up, everybody was like, "Oh my
yeah.
gosh, I feel the same way."
I know. Well, I'm going out to dinner with a girlfriend tonight, and I know we're going to be talking about hormones and
Yes.
different vitamins that we're taking. Like that's like most of our conversation
Yes, for
all day.
sure. For sure. Okay, so let's talk about something a lot of people rely on. Is saving in your 401k enough?
Mhm. Typically not.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not true for everyone, of course. I can't make a blanket statement on that. But
Yeah.
typically, what happens is you've started your contribution maybe when you were 30, 35, maybe you're
Hmm.
45 now. You've made zero changes to how much you're contributing.
Yeah.
You don't know where it's contributed to. It's that kind of mindedness of saving.
Hmm.
And that's why I always say, people say automate it because, it's easier that way. I like automating it, but you gotta be really careful with that because it's really easy just to not pay attention to it, which then you don't
Hmm.
challenge yourself to do more. And then you're not, like you said, doing that reverse projection of like, should I maybe be saving more than I am, you know?
Yeah.
So automation's a good way to start. It's not the end all be all of things, obviously. And that's what 401ks are is automatic,
Yeah.
contribution for the
Yeah.
most part. And I think people don't understand, haven't gone through the process of do we put it in the Roth? Do we put it in the traditional side of the 401k? Most
Sure.
companies have both of those, and they haven't gone
Mhm.
through that exercise of like what that difference looks like tax wise, of course, now, but at the same time, later on in life, having some money that's
Mhm.
after tax, which is what the Roth provides might make it so that you don't have to save quite as much for retirement,
Sure.
right? Because if
Mhm.
you're thinking of, you've put it all in your traditional 401k or your IRA and you you say I need $7,000 a month to live off of and we've done the math, that really is probably like 9,500
Mhm.
that you have to take out to net that. I'm just making it up. That
Sure.
might
Yeah.
but with a Roth, you take out 7,000. So it
Yeah.
does make a big
It's
difference of
huge.
where you put your money. So I think the 401k is a great tool, but just
Mhm.
saying I contribute, so I'm good, that's the
Yeah.
problem, I think, more than anything. And that's very easy to do with a
Yeah.
401k.
Yeah.
So that's why the 401k sometimes cannot be enough for
Sure.
people for what they
Yeah.
want.
That makes sense. So, what's one thing someone could do this week to start aligning their money with the life they actually want?
So I would say a good thing that I always tell people, especially if they're getting to that point where they're looking to stop working at some
Hmm.
point, maybe they're 55 and they're like in 10 years I want to be done doing this. Usually earlier they want to be done than
Yeah.
10 years, but that's okay. And
Sure.
I always say, every in retirement, every day is a Saturday, right?
Hmm.
And Saturdays tend to be our most expensive day.
Yeah.
So I want people to kind of observe what they're doing on Saturday. And usually, again, kids are probably out of the house by that age and that kind of stuff. Obviously, if you have kids, it's going to be a different conversation. But I kind of want people to write what their ideal day in retirement looks like. They
Hmm.
in a cruise ship in, Alaska, or are
Hmm.
they, sitting at home grilling their steak?
Yeah.
What is their ideal day? What just sounds like amazing, heavenly. That's what I
Hmm.
want to do for the rest of my life. Maybe it's playing with the grandkids. Maybe it's,
Hmm.
volunteering at the local hospital, whatever it is.
Hmm.
And that is a good place to
Okay.
start aligning it because you're
Yeah.
actually creating a reality for yourself that you can actually do.
Hmm.
That's the thing is that people are so afraid about talking about money because we're taught that money is all evil
Hmm.
and all that stuff. But really money is getting to control your life and living the life
Hmm.
you really want. That really
Yeah.
is it. And it's
Yeah.
not evil to want to enjoy your life. It doesn't mean you got to go on like, helicopters and be on yachts and all the stuff that we see as money,
Right.
right? There's a
Right.
reason that every like financial guru is on a beach someplace looking like they've been having a tan for. I mean, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking
Right.
about you get to control. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if like let's say your grandkid is 18 and you want
Hmm.
to pay for a year of their college? Wouldn't that be
Yeah.
nice to have that option? That's
Hmm.
what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And you can't do that if you don't save and you don't think about
Hmm.
money and being proactive with it. And so when you don't save enough, you don't have those choices. And so I really want people to think about their ideal so that they feel like they can actually grasp it and get a hold of it because that's what motivates people to move forward.
Love it. Lisa, where can people find you? We're going to have links in the show notes, of course, but where
Yeah.
can people find you?
I would say, obviously our website, which is onevisionretire.com. Obviously everything's up there. We have blogs and other things. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, but I would say my YouTube channel, if you want to get more like education and just kind of get more comfortable with talking about that, is my YouTube channel would probably be the best place to start.
Perfect. And we'll make sure we link that in the show notes. Thank you so much. This has been such an important conversation because I think so many people are realizing it's not just about having money, right? It's about what your money allows you to experience. And what I love about your approach is that it gives people permission to stop waiting and start being intentional
Mhm.
about their life right now, right? So if you're listening and this episode made you think, I don't actually have a plan for the life that I want, that's your opportunity. We're going to link Lisa's information, like I said, and resources in the show notes so you can take the next step and start building a plan that supports your life, not just someday, but now. And as always, if you loved this episode, make sure you follow She Talks Money, share it with a friend, and keep showing up for your financial future because wealth isn't just about what you build, it's about how you live.